How did you almost die? What was it?
I had laryngitis and then I couldn't breathe. And then my mom was up all night. So the nurses came in and gave me sleeping pills so my mom can get some rest. And then I suffocated in the middle of the night. And then my mom found me blue, and then she called the nurse and they wheeled me away and they sent my mom home. Because when you do ER surgery, the mom now gets sent home.
Cool. So we are here at, does this place have a name?
Anki.
Anki. All right. We are here with Aleks Rybchinskiy at Anki. It's a beautiful property. This place is amazing. I like the marshmallow type ceilings. I knew we were driving up to a Chek practitioner when we saw stacks of rocks everywhere. I was like, this is definitely the right place. So, we're going to take these shots. And the first thing that I want to dive into is your health journey. Like wherever, I'm sure you didn't start off, just this optimized human, right? So that's what we're going to start on after we cheers and take a shot of these ketones.
Always checking the ingredients.
Yeah. Always got to double check. Does it look good to you?
Yeah.
Water. Monk fruit.
I don't know what
ketones. That's the
ketones.
Side
is.
Yeah, that's the ketones.
Citric acid.
Yeah.
Basic vitamin C.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good. Shake.
Sure. And then cheers. Down the hatch. So in about 20 minutes, you should notice a heightened, just like clarity is what I noticed from him. So, all right, let's,
that'd be cool.
Yeah. Let's dive into your background. Aleks Rybchinskiy, talk to us about your transition from baby boy to grown man that we see today.
Baby boy, born in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And moved to the United States around when I was 4.5. Lived in Buffalo Grove pretty much my whole life, 24 years. And then I met my beautiful wife, Sarah, who's like 200 feet away from me at all times, pretty much. But
is she here right now in spirit?
Oh yeah. Yeah. She's probably listening in a little bit, or she's on a call, one of the two. But I got to backtrack, obviously, because you asked me baby boy. Yeah. So I almost drowned when I was 1, almost died when I was 3. And they had to give me a tracheotomy, revive me. So that didn't make sense until I was later in my life as to why things make different accesses to different spirit points more accessible. And then Soviet Union collapsed and my parents were like, we got to get out of here. So we came here as refugees.
What year?
92. And so pretty much lived my life here. My parents thought that, the food that was there, because they had food mostly from farms and, your neighbor would slaughter a pig and then you eat pig. Like you knew what that pig ate. And then we moved here and I was like rail thin, I was like skin and bones and, some little bit of meat on me. And so as, my parents were working nonstop as immigrants trying to, put food on the table and make sure we have a house to live in and, things of those immigrant lifestyles. I was eating things that were not always optimal. My mom would always cook at home. And like once a week, we would get hamburgers, which I'm sure my parents mind, not knowing the history of commercial fast food. I'm sure, as I say, you'll know exactly which one I'm talking about. But it was we would get Big Mac. I would get a Big Mac, supersized fries, and a triple thick shake, sometimes 2 Big Macs. And that was like my treat of like, okay, you're going to get bread and meat and vegetables and potatoes and milk spun up into a shake.
Yeah.
They didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know. And by the time I was 10 years old, I weighed like 180 pounds and I was like under 5 feet tall. And my dad weighed about 140 pounds and he's 5'7" and a half. And, so then I would experience people making fun of me for my weight, the way I looked. And it didn't make sense to me because I speak Russian. So my brain, things get translated differently. And the running joke is Sarah's my translator. So when I say something, sometimes it comes off very blunt, but it's honest, it's true. And I've been learning since I've met her pretty much how to say things differently, especially with kids. You can't say certain things to kids directly because it doesn't make sense or whatever. And so back to the 10 years old, people would make fun of me and, maybe not want to play with me. And, for simple thing like the way I look. And it never made sense to me. Like, why wouldn't you want to play with me? I'm pretty cool. I play video games like you, and I play sports like you. And I was very active. I would take my bike out because my parents would be working pretty much all day. So I found out the term latchkey kid from Sarah. They would be gone all day, and I would get home. I'd get up, make myself a toaster strudel, watch Monsters Inc., walk myself to school, come home from school, let the dog out, maybe feed the dog, play with the dog, and then get on my bike, and then it'd be gone until my parents got home. And I had all the autonomy to do all those things. And when people didn't want to play, I'd have like one kid that I'd play with or another one, and we'd ride our bikes all day. So I was active, but I was still overweight because when I'd get my lunch from home, it was healthy, it was home cooked. But then I'd go to school and I'd see pizzas and other kids are eating fruit roll-ups and fries they would dab their pizzas with the napkins. And I'm like, why? That's the good stuff. That's the good flavor. And I would eat, I'm like, you done with that? I would eat their food and my food and other people's food. When they were done, I was like, it didn't make sense to me. And this little detail didn't hit me until later in life. So when my grandpa came with us from Ukraine, and my grandfather on my mom's side and my grandmother on my dad's side. Oh yeah, my grandmother, my dad's side. So my dad's mom and my mom's dad. We were sitting there and I was eating slow, and he goes, the first person that finishes eating can go back to work and make more money for the family. And ever since then, I inhaled all my food, and it never hit me until probably 4 years ago. I was like, holy, that thought is still rolling around in my brain. So I had to I'm working on constantly making sure that, are you full? It's okay that we put this food away. And so instead of having it thrown away, I put it in a Tupperware and I have it later. So that way I don't sit there and eat till I'm sick, And so when I got out of middle school, started going into high school, my parents, back to the dying thing, my parents were very sheltered over me because, seeing your kid lifeless and come out from the operation room with a tube in your throat. Like, you went in fine, you came out not fine, Well, I came in blue because the doctors gave me sleeping pills, things, people have a really interesting perspective on the medical system here. Like, you can go and watch someone's surgery, and you can be in the room. When in Ukraine, when you get delivered, the father is sent home, out of the hospital. And the mom, after the delivery, only gets to see the baby for feeding time, no holding. And here I have, a 7-year-old now, and she never left my side.
Yeah.
Blood work, I'm with you. I'm coming with you. You got to prick her. Oh, she's going to cry. I'm like, that's fine. I'd rather see what's happening.
Yeah.
And so when I died, they tried to keep me from any kind of trauma at that point, because I can imagine now what it feels like to see that happen and then go, no.
How did you almost die? What was it?
I had laryngitis, and then I couldn't breathe. And then my mom was up all night. So the nurses came in and gave me sleeping pills so my mom can get some rest. And then I suffocated in the middle of the night. And then my mom found me blue, and then she called the nurse and they wheeled me away and they sent my mom home. Because when you do ER surgery, the mom now gets sent home. And we would never have found out if my grandma didn't work at that hospital and did some digging to find out actually what happened. Because, the kid went in with laryngitis, inflammation in his throat, and then came out with a tube, sounded like a robot, with a tracheotomy, and tied up the tubes. And they're like, what happened? And so moving back to high school, I asked, can I play some football? And they're like, no. I'm like, I'm doing it. So I signed up for football, and they were like, oh, great. So then I became a three sport athlete, and I played football. I wrestled, and then I played volleyball. And
interesting combo.
I know, right? I had fun doing all of them. And when I signed up for football, it was the summer training camps. I forget what it's called. When you train in the summer before the season. I ended up losing like 40 pounds and gaining and getting taller. And then I noticed the people that went to me with the same high school, I noticed that they were nicer to me. And I don't know if there's a transition between, middle school and high school, but I did notice it. And so I took note of it because my brain sees things very rationally, like, okay, well, you were this way, now you're this way. And then I'm like, all right. So then as wrestling season goes on, by the senior year, I'm back up to 190 pounds, but 5, like my size now. And then there'd be like off seasons where I'd gain weight and I noticed people wouldn't treat me the same. And then I'd lean up for after wrestling and people treated me different. And I'm like, what is happening? So that was like the beginning of my social development of how people interacted with me.
And at the time you didn't correlate it to the weight?
I had a feeling. And, but there's no way to prove it. I was not like, I never asked anyone like, hey, do you not friends with me because I'm fat?
Straight up.
Yeah. But what I noticed is I had friends in all different groups and I found the people that had interesting conversations who I'd gravitate towards. So I'd sit with people who are like, white makeup on their face and black eyeshadow and all black. And then some friends with some cheerleaders and then sit at the jock table every now and then hang out with some nerds that, are on their computers or talking about video games. I'm like, I love all of that. And whoever had the best conversations is who I'd sit by. And I did know that I didn't want to talk about shallow stuff.
Yeah.
And
that's good at that age. That's awesome.
Yeah. I didn't know then. Right. But yeah, on reflection, yeah, it's pretty neat to know that started early versus like people probably listening to podcasts now trying to get depth out of life. And so then I got into trouble with some police when I was 17. And then to stay out of trouble, I started exercising after high school. And then there was once again, my parents were questioning whether I was actually exercising because I would go from work to, I was a bouncer on the weekends. And then, so after work, I'd get off at like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, go to the gym and they go, you're not exercising. 6 months later, they go, oh yeah, he's definitely exercising. And that never really stopped until, and then I played semi-professional football after high school. And then I kept getting bigger. I was like 240 pounds, shredded.
Damn.
And then I got injured. There's always injuries in my life. And then I got injured and then I was at 240, not shredded. But I noticed that's when I met Paul Chek and got some advice from Paul in one of his courses. It's just like not famous, but it's highlighting to me. And all the people around me remember that story because everyone would ask, simple questions to Paul because Paul tends to rant, for a long time, which is wonderful because that's where all the information and the juice is, And everyone was asking, so what's the best, certain exercise? And Paul would entertain it, and then what's the best diet? And Paul would entertain it. And I remember going like, well, I need to ask him a good question. I go, Paul, how can I best help myself? And it was like Moses parting the room and everyone disappeared. And then Paul went right up to my face and he goes, get these nuts off your desk. How do you know you could drink raw milk? You look at yourself. You can't drink raw milk and get gluten. And everyone was so uncomfortable. But I'm over here taking notes, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's here, that's going, okay. By the time I went to the next class, 4 months later, he didn't recognize me anymore. So I've had all these little journeys of injuries and these kind of interactions. And then as the levels go up, you learn about teeth. And in IMS-4, you learn about how the jaw impacts the rest of the body. And so I had this intuitive thing since I stopped training after I was playing football. And my last season that I played, this guy fell and I could see his whole face mask in my hand. And I was a neurosomatic therapist. I was doing manual therapy. I had my own business. I was already coaching people since I was 19 years old. And he fell in my hands. And there was this moment in mid-game, I go, what am I doing? I need these. And so from after that season, I quit football. And I also stopped exercising as hard as I did because through coaching with Paul, in his courses, I realized that there was a lot of resentment and anger towards my dad that he didn't deserve. As a child, I needed that. And as seasons of life comes around and I have my own child, I go, wow, I'm hearing the same thing that my kid said saying to me that I was upset at my dad for, except I can pause and speak from a different experience and go, this doesn't make me love you less. I still talk and play games and spend tons of time and put other things aside to make sure that that's not how they feel and they know I care about them. And so I also, yes, after that moment, I got my body back in shape and I stopped exercising for about 8 years. And I only recently started up. This is my 7th week back of consistent training since I got my teeth put back together and I can actually bite. My teeth were a mess. I can show you some pictures later.
Yeah.
They were all messed up. But the body, the way the teeth interdigitate or couple together, they could either make you stronger or wear your teeth down, impact your breathing, turn off like a hydraulic press. If it has too much pressure, it turns itself off and depressurizes itself so it doesn't break the press. And so a lot of people with like grip strength issues and they wear wraps and things like that. That's a teeth issue for the most part. And so after the last 2 years, I got them off in November. And so I go, okay, it's about time. My teeth, because they felt like piano keys. You take the braces off and they were wiggly.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So every time those teeth wiggle, my whole body felt like it was falling apart. So after about, 3-4 months of getting that out, no, 3 months, because it's November, it's April now. So I've been, it's over a month now. I'm like, I think it's time. And sure enough, my body feels great and I can chew, I could sleep better. I don't snore anymore after getting all those things done. And I still have more to go. That's the thing. There's so much more to go. So that's kind of been the development of, seeing how people treat me, building myself up, getting injured, rebuilding myself, getting injured, rebuilding myself, getting injured, and, thinking that I wanted to play the NFL and then getting injured every time I tried to go to the next league or like arena league, I would get injured. I like tore ligaments in my ankle,
Yeah.
And then I'd go back to training and then some friends were like, hey, let's play volleyball. And so it's fun. And then it became competitive. And then I did a jump a vert test at a volleyball tournament on the 3rd day, and I hit a 42-inch vert. And I didn't think I jumped high. And I knew I jumped high, but I didn't know like numbers wise if it was high or not. And so all of my statistics were high that fit like professional athletes.
Yeah.
But every time I try to compete, it brought me back down. So talking to my soul enough, I go, you need to be able to be like that without actually competing and making money, because the work is interpersonal. The work is helping people out and making sure they can get back on their feet and not be injured and live a good life that's fulfilling and purposeful. But that's kind of from baby to where I am now.
Love it. How did you meet Paul?
So after personal training school, I went to work for Lifetime, and there was a guy sitting next to me, and I understood the material so well, but I had questions. And there's this guy sitting next to me, and I made fun of his last name. And I go, well, it wouldn't be tragic if this is your last name. He goes, this is my last name. And I felt so awkward. And then ever since then, he would be gunning for me to prove me wrong somehow and like put me in my place. And so he was doing something over a foam roller that I didn't agree with. And he goes, well, if my body moves in this direction, why can't I do it? And I go, where'd you learn this from? And he gave me 2 names, Charles Poliquin, and he gave me, Olympic lifting, nutritional supplements. And I'm like, I already did that. I worked at GNC. I had a 500-pound squat and deadlift and almost a 400-pound bench. I was like, okay, I did that. But I'm like, but then who's Paul Chek? And he goes, well, he does the whole thing. He does holistic, emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual. I go, okay, well, that covers 2 other things that I don't know much about. And so I went, and without I never looked him up. I bought all the introductory courses.
Wow.
And the first time I put a DVD in, all the questions that I had at that time were filled in within the first 2 hours of watching his stuff. And obviously maybe have more questions after that. Well, if this is true, then what's this? Then what's this? But then he answered those things. And then so I had to sit with all those things. And then I had to go back to Lifetime, and I became a menace and go, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Well, why are you doing that? But that counteracts that. And everyone's like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And then so, but then when they were in a pinch, they'd come and ask me some questions. But then after the questions were done, they're like, all right. Kind of like how I was treated when I was younger. So there's all these cyclical patterns that are occurring. And, but that's how I met Paul, through a random conversation, through someone checking my attitude, and then me asking, where did you learn this information?
Wow. Yeah, I imagine a Chek practitioner doesn't fit in very well at Lifetime Fitness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was the journey from then? I imagine shortly after you left Lifetime Fitness, and then from then.
So I got fired from Lifetime for not listening to what they were telling me to do.
Sounds accurate.
Yeah. And so I've been secretly plotting on leaving for a while, looking up business locations, looking up equipments, looking up how to start a business, all these things. The day I got fired, I walked over to this person I knew who was a chiropractor, and I go, "Do you know any buildings around here?" She sent me to this management company that was right behind Lifetime. And so I talked to her. The first building she brought me into was a guy that I'd been friendly with for 3 years, and like cordial, and we're always saying hi to each other and, you know, talking about lifting together. And I look at him, I'm like, "What are you doing here?" He goes, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I'm looking for a building. I'm looking for a building." He goes, "I own this building." And I go, "Okay, we're good." And then the manager was like, "Can we go somewhere else and I'll show you other buildings?" I'm like, "I'm good." And that's how I started the business. And that day I signed a lease, and then I went on and paid for a lawyer to start my LLC. And then I sat with the guy that introduced me to Paul Chek, and he grilled me questions on like, what kind of business do I want to start? What's the logo? What's the branding? And I came up with Fusion Health Chicago. And because it blended the East and the West together. So we're fusing health together. And I'm in Chicago, so that's what it is. And so then that's how it all started. And I worked there in Chicago until I moved here. Yeah, lots of trial by fires and painful experiences. And my understanding about business was do really good work, solve people's problems, and they will pay you money for it.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. So when did you move down here? Like, how long were you in Chicago?
24 years. I met Sarah actually at HLC3 in California.
Yeah, at Paul's house?
No, at Paul's course.
Okay.
And then we hit it off. We became good friends. And then Sarah got a divorce. And then I came down here for PaleoFX. And she tells me a month later that she's pregnant. And then 3 months later, I moved down here. And then I've been here ever since.
And here we are.
And here we are.
And here we are.
In October 2020, we got married through all the chaos, and we had to reschedule our wedding several times. And it was the second reschedule, like, we're not moving the third one. Whoever's coming is coming. And yeah, everyone showed up. Open everything. Everyone had a great time. No one got sick. Go figure. But yeah, we were like, we're going to go do what we want to do. And yeah, so I've lived here almost 8, going on 9 years, I think. 2015, I moved down here.
Seems like the right move.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Primal Fusion and all the things that you guys do, because you guys do a lot.
We do a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So Primal Fusion, holistic health coaching company that integrates mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies with high-level clinical assessments and scientific programming. What does that mean?
The easiest way to describe it is if someone has a problem that they can't fix, we want to first figure out where it's coming from. So most people, when they get injured or hurt, and the metaphor, let's say, is they have a house and their floors are flooded. They want to clean up the floors as fast as possible. But no one ever looks up to see if the roof is leaking. So our assessments are 4 hours long, sometimes more, depending on what we need to do. We have tons of paperwork that people fill out so we can get an idea of what is the biggest problem that people experience. And then we address the biggest problems in the room. And whether it be through manual therapy, whether it be through movement, getting reintegration of certain tissues. A lot, like some people have miswiring in their muscles. You know, their hamstrings are firing too soon instead of their glutes, and then you rewire the glutes to fire before the hamstrings, and then their back stops hurting. And it's sometimes so simple like that. But then what's causing the glutes to stop firing? And then you got to keep, it's the food. Okay, well, we got to look at food. And then so when we have this broad net that we cast and figure out how to lower the stresses on all the physiological responses in someone's body, their body has a chance to recover itself. And then anything that we don't do, like the teeth stuff, I refer them out to certain practitioners, and I also monitor what they're doing. And I'm constantly openly communicating with what other people are doing to make sure that they're getting the proper care. Because most people, I don't know how many people do or don't think about this when referrals, but I feel like my referrals weigh on me based on my recommendation to make sure that they get what they need from someone. So if I send someone to a Ferrari dealership, you're going to get a Ferrari, but then they sell them a Honda for the same price as a Ferrari. That's on me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't go check. I didn't check if the Ferrari dealership had Ferraris there. So I try my best to develop as best of a relationship with different practitioners that I refer out to, so that way we can work with the person to get them better. And then, depending on what they need is what we end up going through. And sometimes people need heavy manual therapy. Sometimes people need heavy coaching. Sometimes we need to talk about what's happening in their childhood and it being okay or not okay, or how do we work through that. And do they need a therapist? Do they need a certain recommendation? Do they move right? Do they breathe right? Do they sleep right? Do they poop right? What is the most optimal thing? And if they're not sleeping, let's say their sleep gets off, what's stopping them from sleeping? Instead of giving them aids to sleep, going, why aren't you sleeping in the first place? Because you should be able to close your eyes, be tired by the end of the day. So it could be like, oh, is that a circadian rhythm thing? Well, are they watching a screen up until it's 12 o'clock and they go, I can't sleep, and they're blasted with blue light, and you go, turn on the orange light on your phone, get some blue blockers. And they go, oh, I sleep so much better.
Wow.
You go figure, But that's those simple things that people overlook a lot of times is if they're single modality, they tend to go, okay, well, this is what I'm good at and this is what I'm going to stick to. And then they kind of dabble, versus we kind of get overboard on a lot of different modalities because I'm curious to know how and things work. So that's what we end up doing.
What are some of the main issues that people come to you with?
I have a client right now without an organ.
Oh, wow.
With organs. So we have to figure out how do we clear their system out so they can eliminate properly, how they can sleep properly. And I had clients that couldn't walk very well. Like I'd have to pick them up and move them through the threshold of my house. And the step is probably like 3-4 inches tall. But then this is a common occurrence. Now they're moving around and deadlifting and squatting and cold tubbing, overcoming whatever limitations they had in their mind. People have injuries that they can't figure out. They've been going to physical therapists, like knee injuries, ankle injuries, shoulder injuries, elimination issues. People who have women who don't menstruate or can get pregnant, and you look at their physiology and you go, nothing that you're doing is going to support life going there, because your pelvis is so cranked, it's compressing all your spinal cords. There's no innervation going to your organ down there. And then blood flow. And then so once we restore their physiology to the optimal posture, which most people think posture is like a straight line, but posture is 15-degree curvatures to 17.5-degree curvatures through the spine, through the cervical spine, through the thoracic spine, through the lumbar spine. And those were designed by osteopaths, because when they align the spine in those angles, those are the foramen where the veins, arteries, and nerves come out of. That's the biggest opening. And so if you have nerve innervations and blood supply, there's a good chance that you're going to survive better. So that when I say posture, that's what I mean. Proper curvatures that can be stabilized by the internal unit, the stabilizing muscles, and then the outside muscles, as they move, they don't interfere with those openings, and they can return back to those openings. So when they sleep, some people they have a flattened spine even when they sleep. But when I lay down, you can still feel the curvature because the muscles are doing what they're supposed to do on almost like a background noise.
What are some of the common problems that come from poor posture that people might not even be aware that are attributed to poor posture?
Like tightness in their hamstrings. They could have hamstring injuries. They have poor digestion. They can't breathe right. Because if you're sitting and your diaphragm is being collapsed, the diaphragm, the way it works is it's like an umbrella. The more you pull the umbrella down, and then the fan opens. And so if you collapse the rib cage and the rib cage can't move, your diaphragm can't work, which means there's the other mechanism has to work, which has to lift your rib cage off of your body, which then allows the lung to inflate. So that's a more active system, but that is being used by your scalenes, your traps, your pec minors, your sternocleidomastoid, lifting the rib cage over and over 20,000 times a day. That's exhausting on muscles that probably are no bigger than my thumb, versus your diaphragm, which is this huge muscle that all had with this huge central tendon that one inhale opens and sucks air into your body.
So how do we breathe properly?
If we put our hands on our belly and we put our hands on our chest. So if you take a deep breath in, I'm not going to breathe so that way people don't know. If you take a deep breath and you feel your upper hand move, which is your chest hand, that means you're breathing from your chest if your lower hand isn't moving. If you take a deep breath and your lower hand moves first, and then let's say your lower hand moves and your upper hand doesn't, that's a passive breath. And we're not talking about taking like a Wim Hof or like a full meditation breath. Like we're sitting here idly. But if you take a full breath, you should have full inhalation of your belly. Then in your chest, then you can even lift the shoulder and get it all up while keeping your belly expanded. But at the end, a lot of people draw their bellies in to take that breath, which means they don't really breathe in more air. They exchange the pressures. So the idea is to drop the diaphragm to load the pressure into your thoracic cavity, into your abdominal cavity. And then when you flex your abs over it or draw your belly button in, it creates this lifting mechanism on your spine, which keeps your spine safe, which is why I don't lift with belts. Yeah. And if I did, it was a power lifter, it wouldn't be till 95, 100%. But because it creates this inverted breathing pattern when you could be really strong, in the gym, but what it teaches you is the opposite of what we talk about, because the mechanism that we're talking about drawing in is your transversus abdominis, and how you activate that through a belt. The belt is the transversus abdominis. So you push your belly against the breath or against the belt. So you have to actually push out when you breathe in versus let the belly open and then draw in, which creates all that tension. And so the ideal regular breath as you're sitting here, behind a desk is chest doesn't move, belly in. And then also another little extra tip is making sure people exhale all the way. So when they're sitting here and making sure that belly draws in, and if people feel abdominal discomfort, there's an organ dysfunction. So something in your organ system is not happy, because they're called viscera, because they're viscous. Oil is viscous. Oil is in the car, in the piston, so the piston doesn't fly through the cylinder head. I think that's the right thing.
Car terms.
Yeah, car terms. Anyway, yeah, it stops that movement because viscous fluid does not like to be compressed. And so that way it slows the mechanism down, the speed down, which allows then it to move properly on both ends. And since organs are viscous tissues, they don't like to be compressed. So when you compress them, they push against. So when you draw in and they're not moving or allowing that compression because they're either inflamed, they're going to create pain responses. So the best way to know if your organs are in dysfunction, you can even put your hands on your knees, fully exhale, and then try to suck your belly in.
I'm good.
Like you see a lot of yogis do. And some people will feel discomfort like all over the place. First it's here, then it's on the right side, then it's low, then it's high, then it's like under the rib cage. And then those are going to be where the organs are not feeling the best. So I think I covered that, right?
Yeah.
Passive, belly in. If you're going to take a full breath, belly until it can't expand anymore. And then also then chest. And then a little extra detail. Don't let the rib cage collapse. Should be at about a 90-degree angle. So as you take a deep breath in, a lot of people that breathe through their belly, as they call it, the sternocostal angle from your sternum to your costal, your ribs, it collapses, which means that you're not
on the inhale.
On the inhale. So the belly comes out, but the rib cage collapses. So it's being able to maintain that rib angle or slightly expand. And you're going to notice you can't breathe out or breathe in as far. A lot of good belly breathers that you see that when they breathe in, their rib cage collapses. So do you have that rib stability while you inhale? And then when you take that full breath, you're going to notice, I can't breathe as far as I used to. And then breathe through your chest and then through your neck. And then you can fully let it exhale. And then follow your exhale down from your belly and then draw the belly in. And you're going to notice right on the opposite sides of your hip bones, like or the ASIs. But if you don't know, right around those bony structures on your hips, right inside, you're going to feel as you exhale, they're going to start to burn a little bit. And that's your TVA activating. That's a good sign.
Say that one more time.
So the hip bones, when people see their hip bones, right where their oblique angles are, they're going to see these little bones stick out. Or they can feel them about an inch in and an inch down. As you exhale, and you draw that belly in and you draw it hard. you squeeze your anus up and you draw hard, you might notice that they start to burn. And if someone without a properly developed transversus abdominis, that's how you know it's contracting. After a while, it'll stop spasming. So that's how you take a proper breath. And then there's more to it, but I feel like this we're gonna.
What other tips do you have for proper posture aside from breathing mechanics?
I like. Here's a fun one that actually I'm going to share with you first. I've been playing with this. So you put your heels up against the wall or a little bit off the wall, depending on, if you lift or not. You may have a bigger butt. Standing. And you put your hand under your back and you slide your whole palm behind your back around the thickest part. This is your thenar eminence. You slide that through the thickest part. And you see if you can touch your back or your upper back, your butt, and your head on the wall without straining. And if you can't, do what we did right now, which is put it there and then draw your TVA in, and you're going to notice that it's going to straighten you up. And if it does, that means your TVA, your transversus abdominis, is not integrated into your breathing pattern and into your movements, and and you're using your ligamentous system to hold you up like a crane, almost like kind of holds you up through the ligamentous system, which also takes load, and it does get stronger over time. But when you rely on it, that's how people get hurt, and still bony structures move, and that's how they develop injuries. They could have strong ligaments, and then when they lift too much or in the wrong direction and the joint loses its rotational ability to stabilize, or its instantaneous axis of rotation being stabilized, then you get injured like within moments. So that's a good way to get into posture. And also some people have, there's different ways, there's different observations of different postures. A lot of people have forward head, but they also can have an elevated chest. So that usually means that they have a flat spine in their neck. No, not extra curved, but flattened. So there are different things that need to happen. So if someone notices like they're like a confident posture, like their chest is way up, and you're going to notice their chin is closer to their sternum, and that usually means that their spine is straight, which is usually a jaw issue. Because as you start off with this kyphotic posture, your head is forward, and then you do all the exercises, the leaning against the wall or stretching your suboccipital, stretching your neck, bringing you back, but then you can't breathe because your maxilla is, your mandible is in your airway. So you have to compensate to open your airway up. So now you have this confident posture, but it's not a relaxed posture. And you could even people can try this at home, where if you were to bring your head back, retraction, and stick your jaw forward, now breathe through your nose. A lot of people might be able to breathe through the nose. Now, once they get a good, solid feeling, now bite again. They may notice it's going to impact their airway.
Yeah.
So they need a good airway doctor, like Dr. Felix Liao, 6-foot tiger, 3-foot cage, is a good introduction to this whole world. It spells it out very simply, gives you studies, shows his progress with his patients. It's a wonderful, easy read to know how the jaw can impact your airway. And so for a lot of people that are working with people with forward head posture, let's say they don't have an airway or a jaw issue, you can fix that super easily. Within less than a month, your head's back to where it's supposed to be. But people that have reoccurring problems or something else going on, it's either an airway or an atlas or a cranium misalignment or an organ dysfunction, that every time they get in a good posture, they get compression on their organs. Oh, they go back down because they're not changing their habits around what they're eating because they don't want to get rid of it. Or they're not drinking enough water and their body's dry and it doesn't eliminate properly. And then so it basically folds them in on themselves and then hardens them up.
Wow. Let's do that exercise after we're done recording. I think that'd be good to insert into the video. There are so many things that can be the cause of whatever people's issues are. What's the problem with going to most doctors to fix these things? And I'm talking traditional Western medicine doctors, because from my experience, they'll just prescribe you some pills and just try to cover it up. But obviously that persists. And we just barely scratched the surface of what these issues could be caused by posture, breathing. So what are some of the most common issues that people come to you with? I think I asked that already, but the things that you mentioned, those can't be the most common. Like the person who had trouble like stepping over the step. So like
they're not the most common.
Yeah. What are the most common that people come to you with?
Reoccurring injuries.
Okay.
And basically
with athletes or general population?
Reoccurring injuries with athletes that they can't get over. Once they get to a certain area, something breaks, and then they try again and it breaks, or they get tweaked, and it creates hesitation in going full out. For the most part, also it's the conversation tends to be whenever someone hears that knows about me and they're talking to someone and then someone's complaining about the same thing that's been happening that they can't treat, they're like, I'll go see Aleks. That's like the most common way that people get on the phone with me and go, oh, I've been complaining about it and someone told me to go see you. And they said you'd be able to fix it. But the back of the prescription bottle, all the symptoms, those are simple. It's a simple way to go if you have a high blood pressure and, for all intents and purposes, I don't treat any of that stuff, but I, work on the whole person. And then if they go, hey, great, whatever.
So in your 4-hour assessment, give us some examples of some of the things that you test for.
So in the 4-hour assessment, we go through, the very first thing is we go through breathing. We make sure that, how are you breathing? What's your airway like? Is it narrowed? Is it restricted? How are your ribs while you're breathing? What's happening? Are they expanding, collapsing? We'll look at each rib as, if that's an issue, I see some ribs that need to be addressed, then I'll go measure those. Then we go to the jaw, and then we look at, and I see, do you have any metal in your mouth? Do you have missing teeth? Do you have cavitations? Talk to them about, do you have abscesses? Have you gotten any teeth pulled? What dental work you have or had? Do you have surgeries in your mouth? Because anesthesia also plays a huge part, root canals. So we figure out all those things. And if people I ask people ahead of time, I'm like, if you have dental records, like save you the time.
Mm-hmm.
Then we go through their atlas and we see, is their cervical spine. So if you take someone's head off, and then for people that don't know what an atlas is, it's your C1 vertebrae. So if you take the head off, that's the topmost vertebrae of your spine. You put the head back on. Now you got your C1, and that accounts for 50% of your rotation in your whole spine. And your cranial nerves and vertebral arteries go through your atlas. So if that's rotated more than a degree each way, you're going to start cutting off circulation in places, which means you're not going to get blood flow, innervation into your hands, and then all the way down the body. So we see what is your atlas doing in relationship to itself, and also the movement that you go through. So it could be straight when you're moving, but then you turn your head and it's locked in one position. Is it fixed to the skull? Is it fixed to the spine? We need to figure out all those things. Then we go through the rest of the spine and go, are any joints blocked, or is anything not moving? Then we go to the shoulder, and then I run a couple of simple tests to go. Actually, not really simple, but run some tests to see, do you have a potential labrum tear? So that way I need to go, okay, well, this person may need a doctor. They need to go get a surgeon to go fix their shoulder, and maybe they didn't want to go to the hospital. But then they get a holistic guy like me and go, hey, you got some stuff torn off your body. Like you need to do this first, or you need to go get a consult to see whether this is what we think it is or not. And if they pass those, then we go to see, is it any impingements? Are there range of motion issues? Is it end range? Is it through the range? Like where does it hurt? And are any limitations to your movement? And then we go down the rest of your spine. We check spinal angles to make sure, are you in that proper posture? Are you in the 17-degree range? Or what's off? So we look at the cervical spine in relationship to the thoracic, in relationship to the lumbar spine. And what is your pelvis doing in all of this? Then we measure the pelvic angles. Then we measure your core function. Is all of the inner unit muscles working? And if they're not, okay, noted. And then we go through all the primal pattern movements to make sure all the movements that you're doing, what do they look like? Are you squatting properly? Are you leaning? Are you tilting? Is your knee going in? What's happening? What is programmed in your mind?
Almost nobody squats properly. It's scary.
Yeah. I mean, you told me that I look like a very healthy guy. And even I am like, I'm not going to push my squats because something feels off today. And I know that if I can't bury my squat and I work on it, like the chances of the general population being like, no, my squat's perfect is slim to none. And then what's even interesting is like, I check what's programmed in their mind, which is interestingly enough is when I ask people to squat, it's atrocious. And then I'll fake like an irritation. I'll go sit down, and they do a perfect squat. And I'll go stand up. I go sit down, stand up, sit down. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, that's a perfect squat. Why don't you squat like that? They're like, I don't know. My trainer told me this is a squat. And I go, you sit and poop probably 3 times a day, hopefully 1 to 3 times a day. I hope. Constipation is another thing people come see me for.
Yeah.
But people have programs in their mind thinking that the certain lift corresponds with a certain movement, but they do the movement all the time. So then I have to rewire their mind to do different things. Like that thing, that atrocious wobbly thing that you showed me is not a squat. You sitting down is a perfect squat. Now let's grab a kettlebell. Now, okay, pretend you're taking a poop. Oh, okay. And perfect. Great. Okay. Now every time I say do a squat or take a poop, I say, okay, now you're doing a squat. Now you reprogram this is actually a squat. So we have to rewire how the brain works. But that's later. So once I identify that there's an issue with some kind of muscular imbalances, and then I go and read it. It takes like 2 hours to read all 70 pages, and then put a program together that directly fixes those issues. And it takes a lot of time. And if I get broken, I have to go and take more time. So I have to find time to like really sit down, lock all doors, turn off all the things, all the phones, and then focus on this thing. Because there's like 70 pages of assessments. It's hundreds of assessments I read through and make sure I don't mess something up, because you could prescribe an exercise. And to be this precise, I need to make sure that I am very diligent that I don't prescribe one exercise or give them one exercise that counteracts another exercise. And so that's basically what the assessment is. And then once they submit their paperwork, then we have a whole other dive into what's happening in their food, in their mind, in their relationships at home. What are their biggest struggles, traumas? And that way we can have a big understanding of what's burdening someone. If someone has forward head posture and kyphotic, like someone could be heartbroken and they could be overwhelmed and they can't get over the overwhelm. And this posture is like, I can't fucking do it anymore.
Reaffirms it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so when you find that out and you go, well, what if we lift that? Let's pretend that we lift, and you see them get better. You see them lift right up and they go, wow, that feels so much better. And I'm observing, they don't even know what they're doing, but I'm observing them get right upright and go, wow, that if I feel confident, that would feel a lot better. And then they end up getting into like perfect posture. So these things, they all interact. And Joseph Campbell says it best: you can't touch any part of the spider web without affecting the whole spider web or the rest of the spider web.
I love that. Yeah.
Hopefully I answered your question.
Yes. Yeah. For the most part, I mean, it's a 4-hour assessment, so there's a lot to it. What do you think that the main cause of poor movement patterns is? Because as babies, we understand how to squat perfectly. Like if you look at a baby in a squat, it's the perfect squat. And then we get older, and what happens from our perfect movement patterns to where we are now?
I see this happen in women a lot because babies breathe perfectly, right? So let's start there. Babies breathe perfectly. And what happens when kids get older and they say random stuff and mean stuff to see how powerful their words are? And I know many people like this, that when they take a deep breath, at some point in their life, someone goes, oh, your belly looks fat. And they suck it in. They never breathe again through their belly.
Yeah.
And it's tragic because I have 3 daughters. And I'm always breathing through my stomach. I'm always affirming them and making sure that like this is functional.
Yeah.
That is a mental disease you're about to put yourself into. Like that is dysfunctional. You breathing with your belly. And then they all know now that breathing with your belly is how you regulate your system. So, but most people don't have these conversations. Most people haven't spent 16 years in coaching and 12 years, 13 years with Paul Chek hanging around Paul Chek, and have ingrained this into my nervous system, and be able to speak in that articulately and have, young kids, your kids trust you, and they're like, okay, that makes sense. And also be able to explain this to them in a way that they can understand. So I would say it starts there. And once you restrict the amount of oxygen that's coming in, you are now forcing, let's say belly is 2/3 of your breath, but let's say also at 75% ease. Now you have the 1/3 of your breath, but also your airway is restricted. Your posture has changed, which means your blood flow and your oxygen exchange between your lungs and your heart and through your muscles and tissue, and your detoxification goes off. Now you add some food every now and then that's not helpful, or let's say more often than now and then. And now your body can't compensate that by detoxing because you have poor airway, poor breathing. And you do that for 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years, and you have a stockpile. It's like what happened in the ocean. We don't notice it right front. And now you have a big pile of garbage in the ocean, except it shows up in your body, not somewhere else you can't see. And so that's where it starts. Now, if you have organ inflammation and you can't draw your belly, you can't stabilize your pelvis. And if your jaw is underdeveloped from poor or from malnutrition, which is Weston A. Price's work.
Yep.
If your jaw's malnourished and deforms, and now you can't have proper airway, proper breathing, and then now you can't stabilize your core, what are you going to do? You're going to hang off your ligaments. And then on top of that, we're sitting at desks at school, and desks at work, and then we think it's a good idea then to get barefoot running shoes and train for marathons after we've been sedentary for 30 years, and our feet are all busted up, ankles are busted up, can't squat even more, your calves are tight, fascia's bound up, you're like in a straight jacket in your fascia, and you're telling me about the foam roller with the vibration in there. I'm like, I didn't even heard of that. I got to try that out. But people don't even like lay on their muscles, and they go, oh, that hurts, I won't do it again. But it's like, no, if it hurts, you should probably lay on it some more. So those compounding things over years of our lives cause problems. And also a lot of us do high school sports, middle school sports, college sports. And then I've worked with more professional athletes that I've seen carry terrible squat form, where I'm like, how are you doing that? How are you not injured? Like I've seen people take 315, 365 pounds and look like they're going to fold in half like origami, and they come right back up. And I'm like, this is insane how you're like, oh, you're probably not going to live very long in the league. Yeah. And sure enough, they don't, because they don't take the time to fix these things. They're like, oh, it's working for me. And so coaching is also a big thing. Education of coaches is a huge thing.
On that point of it's working for me, what do you say to somebody who says, I'm fine, who you can clearly tell is not fine? I think a lot of people don't know how good they could feel, myself included. Like when I was in high school eating the cheeseburgers and all the crap, like I thought I was feeling okay until I learned that there's this whole other world out there of healthy food and learning proper movement and breathing. So what do you say to those people who think that they're doing fine?
Well, you only know what you know.
Yeah.
And what I could say to people like that is, I'll start with this analogy. Someone is excited about having a kid, and then they have a kid. They thought they knew love until they had their kid. Then they're like, I had no idea what love was. And you can do that for many things, like freedom. You thought you had freedom. You go to work, you got your money until you started your own business. It was hard. And all of a sudden now you feel freedom because you've built your business up, and you go. So most of the time we don't even know what the horizon is, because it's almost like we boil ourselves like frogs. You know that analogy? Mm-hmm. You can't boil a frog by throwing it in hot water. You got to slowly tune it up.
I actually heard that's factually false. Like, I think if
it sounds good though.
It does sound good. Like it makes sense, but I think factually that doesn't happen.
For analogy's sake then.
Yes.
But I appreciate that because I don't want to think that anymore if it's not true. Well, there's an example of how people could change. They're like, oh, facts. Presented with information.
Don't trust me. I mean, let's get a fact checker on that. From my understanding,
hopefully we don't boil frogs for this analogy.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know how good you could feel until you feel that way.
But I will say this. If they trust the process long enough, let's say they give themselves 3 months to a year, even 2 months, let's say 2 months to a year. If someone can maintain good habits, then they go back to their old habits and they will notice a difference. That's the best way to tell, because you don't know how far you're going if you never look back. So if you're walking up a mountain, you don't know actually how far you're going because you can't see the top of the mountain and you can't see the bottom of the mountain. But then when you look back, you go, holy smokes, I've traversed a lot of mountain. And that's the same analogy. And when you're walking towards the horizon, you don't know because the horizon stays the horizon all the time. So every time you're walking towards love, love is the horizon. Your potential is the horizon, but you never get to the horizon.
Mm.
And so you'll always keep walking, but you never really know how far you've gone until you actually try to go backwards. And you go, well, there's a certain point where you go, I'm further forward than I am back to where I was. And as long as they can cross that threshold, then they start feeling better. So I haven't drank in like 11 years. I did for Sarah's birthday, someone was like, got organic wine, biodynamic, give me all the, there's no sulfates in them. And so I started drinking it. And the next day I was like, I feel horrible.
Really?
Yeah.
I noticed the opposite. I noticed that Dry Farm Wines, who is biodynamic, bullshit free. I noticed that I was able to wake up the next morning feeling great, like seemingly no impact in sleep, no reduction in HRV, resting heart rate, and I track it with a Whoop. But how many glasses do you have? Did you
a lot.
Chug it? Okay,
yeah,
well,
there's a lot of glasses.
Yeah,
yeah.
My tests are on like two glasses. I rarely go over that.
The way my brain works is it's either I'm all in or all out.
Yeah, I get it.
And so it's either because if I drink, I'm also Eastern European. I used to drink heavily, and my parents used to drink. Like they can finish a handle and you won't even notice.
No problem.
No problem.
Wow.
And I've had some friends later when I was still drinking try to like keep up with them, and they were blasted. And it's an impressive amount that they used to drink, but now they did drink a lot less, like a lot less. So the way my body works is it doesn't really uptake that as efficiently. And so I have to drink more. So it's if I want to feel tipsy or get to that like good tipsy feeling, I have to drink more. But if I drink more, I feel like crap.
Have you played around with like kava or GABA or any sort of like alcohol alternatives?
I have played around with, I'm not going to say the name, but kratom and kava mixtures. And I got heavily addicted to that stuff. And it was painful getting off of it. At this point in my life, I don't want to do anything that trips anything like that up anymore. I have a good enough time, honestly, drinking water. I have
imagine that you can have fun with just water.
Yeah,
crazy.
And eating good food, and I like to eat snacks that I make. So I'll get an antifungal, like we have antifungal cookbooks, and I make antifungal desserts. So that way I can at least overeat, and I know my body can process food because I have a healthy digestive system, and if I put on more fat, then I'll get rid of the fat at some point. But the way my body feels on other substances, I'm always sober.
Yeah.
When I'm with people, because I like it. I've had enough of blackout days, and I've had enough of feeling terrible, and I've had enough of making a fool out of myself at times that I'm like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Being me.
Yeah.
And if someone's listening to this and they may be triggered, it's like, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. Remember, this is my experience. This is how I feel. And this is where I'm at in my life. So I'm speaking for no one but myself. And those are those moments where I'm like, but if I drink wine, I still feel groggy, because in order to get the thing I want, I'm not drinking it for the taste. Like the taste is good, but you're drinking it for the benefit.
Yeah.
And the added social benefit doesn't outweigh the way I feel the next day when I'm pretty charismatic and fun and goofy as it is.
That was me in the Marine Corps. It's like, I'm not drinking to have a few drinks. Like I'm drinking to get drunk. And after enough of that, I realized, hey, life is good sober. I can just enjoy this clear-headed.
And I couldn't move. Like I couldn't exercise the next day. I wasn't flexible. My stomach hurt. Like my head hurt. I couldn't think. I couldn't play with my kids. Like there's so many things that,
doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense to me anymore.
So talk on some of the most important healthy habits that you recommend. So if going back to that person who quote unquote thinks that they feel good and they're curious about exploring the state that we're referring to, what are the most beneficial healthy habits that they could start with in general?
Drink clean water. Stop drinking tap water. Get either a good filter, Here's the math for anyone not convinced. If you buy a gallon of water, $1 a day, you drink a gallon of water a day, let's say for most people, $365. A good filter, a good reverse osmosis filter is going to cost you $400 to $700. 2 years, your whole filter is paid for. You have free water now. After that, it's free. Drink enough water that you can feel hydrated. Have some minerals in your body, whether you add salt to those, add some salt to those minerals. Go to bed by 10 o'clock. If you could fall asleep at 10 and get up at 6, without going into how the body restores itself, there's a reason why people say that matches your circadian rhythms, and your organs and your mental state recover in the middle of the night when you go to bed from 10 to 6. There's a function that happens that recovers your mental and physical state, which means you got to say no to stuff. So quit staying up late. It's easiest way to build up cortisol and add fat to your body.
Yeah.
If people are feeling brave enough, cut out processed food and stay away from gluten and commercial dairy. I've even tried the best of the best of dairy, and it doesn't work for me. And I cut out eggs too, so it doesn't work for me. Stay away from processed sugars. Poop. If you poop once a day, like if you can get a good poop in, it should be about 12 inches long, be brown. And please don't hold your poop in. If you have to poop, whatever it is, go poop. It's the most satisfying feeling, and you're getting rid of all this stuff. So poop, go to bed on time, drink water, cut out certain foods. And I'm not even saying all the foods that aren't gluten and dairy and eggs. Eggs, most people can do eggs, but I bodybuilded and I ate egg white protein, everything. And I gave myself an allergy, so I can't eat eggs anymore.
Damn.
Yeah, it sucks because I like eggs.
Yeah.
And then cut out processed sugar. And processed foods, meaning like bars and like dry things that, nuts, because nuts will tend to constipate a lot of people, especially if they're eaten with like meat and starches and then nuts. I mean, that's a recipe for your body to create compact dry colon, because your body has to hydrate that. And where does it hydrate it from? It hydrates from your body, pulls water out of your body to hydrate your poop so it can get it out of your body. And if you don't have enough water, then it stays in there and then it rots. So now you have bacteria, fungal overgrowths, parasites, and now they're eating for you. And so let's digress a little bit. Go for a walk after meals. You eat lunch, go for a walk, 30 minutes, nothing crazy, make sure you're not like huffing and puffing. Go for a regular walk, look around at nature. If you can get your feet on the ground every day, great. If it's not every day, okay, get a grounding mat. If you live in a high rise, if you live in a condo apartment where there's tons of electromagnetic stress around you, get a grounding mat. Watch how much better you'll feel.
Yes.
And you combine all those together, then it's a good recipe for starting that train off right. And most of that stuff's free.
Yeah. Watching the sunrise, grounding, clean water is basically free. You findaspring.com. Go
findaspring.com. Yeah.
Get some water. It's free. 2 final questions.
Mm-hmm.
What are you most excited about right now?
So, I'm really excited about bridging the gap between practitioners and introducing them into airway mouth dentists. So one of our colleagues on our community, Primal Pride, where people come in on office hours, and every Monday we come in for 2 hours live, and I answer all their questions deeply, way deeper than I can get anywhere. And then we record them, store them. So they ask a lot about mouth stuff, because I've been going through it. They've been watching me go through it for 2 years and struggling, and like, I can't chew anything and complain the whole time. And, but I'm telling them all the benefits that I'm getting. And so one of our colleagues was asking what they could do. And I was like, oh, read this book. So she reached out to Dr. Felix Liao. And then Dr. Felix Liao, who wrote that book and several other books, I think My Child's Beautiful Face is great for any parent who has kids, and how to address those mouth issues before it gets really complex.
Like nasal breathing and stuff like that.
Well, if you taking the jaw out of the mouth, you could breathe out of your nose. And then if you bring the maxilla forward, the vomer has somewhere to sit. So you can't really, if someone has a deviated septum, it could be a maxilla retraction, because then the vomer has nowhere to go, and it either goes through the palate. So if the people feel like this sounds like them, put tongue to roof of your mouth. If you feel a lump under there, that's your nose. It's your vomer slicing through your maxilla and taking up space because it has nowhere to go forward. It needs to be brought out of your nose, but it can't do that without a longer track to sit in. So with him, he found a practitioner in Canada. She worked with Canada. She started getting migraines. She flew down here to come see us, and I tuned her up. She came back to Canada, and she got observed by her dentist. She goes, "What happened? I have never seen so much structural change occur and all this symmetry happen so quickly." So then she reached out to Dr. Felix Liao. Dr. Felix Liao reached out to me. And then we started talking, and it was like a 15-minute consult that was an hour and a half conversation. And we were nerding out about what we are doing. And so he's working on getting practitioners like me to bridge the gap for dentists, because dentists are bent over a table all day. And they're also needing people like us. So we're going to work together to get a person like me to connect dentists with practitioners. And I couldn't think of a better thing to do in a time like this. And this whole time, and then work with Dr. Felix Liao, getting him as a case study to show him what I do, and then use that as a case study to show dentists the power of a Chek practitioner, neurosomatic therapist, to do the structural work with the airway dentistry to really maximize the potential. Because if you work on the teeth, the body could fall back in place. That's the chiropractic mindset. If we move this back, everything else kind of shifts back after a time. But if we could do both of them at the same time, that's massive. Not only change for a person, but faster. They don't have to spend so much time doing both. One, then you got to go find the other. It's like, no, let's pair it all together. Let's see who we all are and hold each other accountable and help each other out and refer back and forth, but also treat each other. So that's what I'm really excited about, bridging this gap.
That's in the works currently. That's very exciting. All right, last question. What does thriving mean to you?
Thriving seems like it's easy. It's ease. Ease of life, where you don't have to have the stuff figured out, but you know where you're going and you see light at the end of the tunnel, and you're not living in darkness of where your health is going, where your mind is going, where your relationship is going, where, life is going. That seems like thriving to me. Not the absolving of stress, but knowing how to navigate it in a life that wants to put things of gluttony and lust in front of you. You know how to navigate these situations. And I feel like if you know how to navigate certain situations, especially with modern marketing nowadays and fear, then I think you're thriving, because you have your own mind. That means you have your own mind. You have critical thinking abilities. You have discernment. You know what you're looking at, and you're okay with being alone. And then by being alone, paradoxically, you find people that are also on the same journey. And then being there long enough, you find out you're not alone. And if you're listening to this, you're definitely not alone. So that I feel like that's thriving, even if it doesn't feel like there's people around you and it doesn't show up the same way you see on Instagram with like the Lambo in your driveway and like, yachts and superficial situations. I still think you're thriving. If you have a good head on your shoulders, your kids are fed, you love your partner, you got all the love, you're thriving.
Agreed. Love that. Aleks, thank you for helping me fulfill my purpose, which is to make thriving standard. I think you summed it up perfectly. Appreciate you coming on the show.
I need to find a place to put this that means that I can see it.
Yeah. Let's make thriving standard.
I like it. Love it.
Peace.